Which criticism of the kids today is actually totally valid? I mean, the amount of teachers in America complaining that students of all ages, including teenagers, are unable to read properly is probably something to be concerned about. One of the odd things about the kids today, which I think will be important to look at in the future, is that kids today are consuming content made by kids. That's never happened before. But a lot of the YouTube channels, TikTok accounts, etc., that they look at, are made by kids the same age as them. I feel like Gen Z is growing up in an era filled with rage bait more than there's ever been in the past, and public discourse is going to look wild when they're in the 30s and 40s. Kids today have subpar typing skills compared to the generation that grew up with physical keyboards. Many of them are far too small to effectively operate heavy machinery, particularly those under the age of 10. They're overly anxious. Our brains were not fit to withstand criticism on a global scale, which social media offers, and children without yet a prefrontal cortex are stunting their mental health capacity. They seem to have a lot more anxiety than my generation. We were more relaxed. These kids have anxiety and crazy expectations. No one played a sport year-round for 20 hours a week when I was kid, with few exceptions. These kids play constant sports and after-school tutoring and need to do homework, get good grades, and start athletics at the same time. Gen X didn't give a shit about any of that. We opted out. Their social skills leave a lot to be desired. Kids today are still suffering with the aftermath of lockdowns, combined with the overexposure to certain badly regulated forms of social media, TikTok. They are worse in school, not just academically but behavior-wise as well. A teacher friend told me about how she is constantly getting shit on by her classes. From how she described it, it sounds like outright bullying. She basically said that they openly mock and laugh at her for everything she says or does. In her words, a running commentary of criticism. A school in a nearby town lost 18 teachers at Christmas, all quit from being sick of the abuse. My year was considered awful when I was in school, but it was mainly refusal to do things, arguments, the usual. Nowadays it's less back and forth with students and teachers and more just a barrage of insults and threats. After hearing that, I really wonder how long teachers will last as a whole if something doesn't change. Some kids today have a very limited attention span and can barely read despite being high school graduates. One of my kids' friends is like this. A sweet person but basically consumes a media diet of YouTube shorts. She doesn't read anything ever. When she talks she sounds like she's speaking Newspeak from 1984. Instead of saying "this is delicious," she might say "this is so good." They aren't as sociable they used to be. When I was a kid, going to the neighbor's house to wrestle in the backyard was common. Now kids are much happier just sitting at home playing a game. We are in our phones and devices too damn much to enjoy life with each other. I think Gen Z are very progressive when it comes to things like LGBTQ, disabilities, and neurodiversity, but they have a big issue with ageism. It feels like a pathological need to be young and a big fear about getting older. A new meta-analysis with studies from mainly Western countries just showed that kids overestimate their own abilities more than before. https://srcd.onlinelibrary.wiley.com/doi/full/10.1111/cedev.14042. I haven't read it yet, because I just saw it yesterday, but it proves the research by the American psychologist Jean Twenge showing that Americans are getting more narcissistic. It's just happening everywhere in the developed world, and the trend began way before social media. I believe wealth is the cause. The real problem is the insane way they make a heart with their fingers. Teacher here. They truly are entitled and can't manage or regulate themselves. Kids today will self-diagnose mental health conditions to justify their difficulties in life. Don't get me wrong, Young people with legitimate mental health struggles affecting their lives do exist, but unless a medical professional evaluates you and makes a diagnosis, I will take your #actuallyautistic TikTok with a grain of salt. I also have a hard time believing that so many people from Gen Z have did. It's an exceedingly rare diagnosis, so much so that there's even a debate among trained psychiatrists about it potentially not even being a real thing at all. The non-existence of media literacy. The amount of misinformation that is easily spreading on social media is scary. Especially when it comes to stuff like basic biology. They're kind of bullies. Not really a new thing, but I thought making fun of other people's clothing/appearance would go away as millennials became parents. Terrible handwriting. Having worked at a university, younger people aren't very good expressing their needs. Whenever someone came to my office for something, I had to play with words to try to decipher what they were trying to say in order to give them the help they needed. The kids today need to stop putting Botox and fillers into their faces before they've even finished developing their frontal lobes. I knew this thread would be a gold mine. The kids today have victim mindset. They will overreact instead of accepting their fault and working on them if you try to criticize them. I really don't mean to sound like a boomer here, but instilling work ethic before adulthood is critical, and I think there's been a decline in that lately. Make sure kids are helping around the house, show them how to wrench on shit, things like that. Less emotional maturity and lack of ability to cope under pressure. Screen addiction. Disclaimer, I'm 33 but still one of the kids where phone use is concerned. They're assholes. Kids used to at least have some kind of manners. I'm only 24, I'm not ancient. The amount of kids, 5y16y I've personally witnessed, that will have full-blown meltdowns in public if they don't get XYZ immediately is actually scary for me. That's not even factoring in when they get told a flat no, especially the older kids. Why is there no emotional regulation? There's no way this is just because of the pandemic. They need to stop fucking disrupting foot traffic in public places to film themselves badly dancing to loud awful music on TikTok. Especially here in NYC. We've got rules, man, don't block the fucking sidewalk. I work at Ulta and I also know that Sephora has this issue too. Kids, specifically preteen girls, today are actively using retinol. Using retinol at such a young age, the only exception is prescription use, will damage their skin barriers. Their small talk skills are next to nothing. None if we talk about actual kids and even teenagers, because for every weakness or flaw that is predominant in their generation, the fault lies with the preceding generations for setting them up to fail. The kids today have, by and large, been raised by a bunch of adults who never should have had kids. Basically that their parents failed them. Kids these days are crap at getting their BMX bikes airborne from hitting a curb. The kids today had their education disrupted by COVID and have not had the chance to catch up. Extremely attention-seeking, unable to critically think, trendy victims of the system with complete lack of understanding of the real world and ability to process facts because it might not be the politically correct narrative lines they've been fed. I'm saying that as someone who has been pretty much a liberal progressive moderate my entire life. I consider myself independent now. They can't really deal with the real world. They need trigger warnings for everything, even things that are unfortunately a reality of life for many people. I feel like they don't have tough discussions in school anymore. In the 80s and 90s we were told that the 50s were better. All those Gen X kids were ruining everything. You know, the same Gen Zers now complaining about millennials. It happens every generation. There's a quote from ancient Greece thousands of years old about the kids these days ruining everything and being undisciplined and whatever. And honestly, young people are always a bit more sensitive in general, because that's how growing up and maturing works. But the older generations never remember that they were like that once too. And they forget that they too were complained about ruining everything back when they were young. The millennials will be complaining about the younger generation too in a couple of decades and remembering how great the 00s and 10s were. Sidewalk and hallway etiquette. Walking 2 to 3 abreast as others come toward them. I'm not going to walk in the street so you can hear what Aiden is saying. Move over or be moved over.